if you're a high achieving person, or maybe you're very driven, you have big goals for yourself, you're a busy parent or a business owner, a big executive, and you just struggle to take good care of yourself, maybe struggling with the nitty gritty details of eating at certain times or having balanced meals or sleeping enough. You're just struggling to make health work for you and your schedule. This episode is absolutely for you. I sit down with Dr. Kirsten Vandenheuvel, who's a naturopathic doctor who supports high achieving individuals to feel more energized, focused, and deeply connected to themselves and their health. And we talk about what to look for if you identify as this kind of person, what you might be a little bit more prone to, the symptoms or health issues that often come up for this population, as well as kind of the root causes to that, what's really behind some of the health issues that can come up, and what you can do today to start supporting your health and really using strategic changes to make it approachable, to optimize your health and feel your best, be more productive, show up more fully like yourself, and really enjoy your life more fully. She leaves lots of practical, approachable tips that I think you're going to walk away with feeling really empowered and feeling like you have a good plan and ideas to start to change your health today. I hope you really enjoy it as much as I did. Dr. Kirsten, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to start with learning a little bit more about you and how you got into what you do. If you could tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now and how you got into your specialty.
Yeah, my focus is on high achieving, high performing women. The journey to get here has been long. It started in probably in high school when I was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do with my life, as many of us do. And I realized that I was really into health and wellness. I started in the fitness space. I was doing a co-op at the time at a local gym. So I knew I really liked that area. And that kind of brought me into the world of kinesiology. And that's what I focused on in university. When I got there, I learned I really still like this health stuff, but this maybe isn't exactly for me. Personally, I didn't want to be a chiropractor. I didn't want to be a physiotherapist. And I learned as I was in it that there was going to be more to my journey on top of what I already did. And so I ended up doing like a little bit of an energy exchange at a yoga studio where I met someone who had recently graduated from naturopathic medical school in Toronto, just by the fate of the time and how everything came together. And I had never heard of naturopathic medicine. I didn't know it was a thing. I always just knew that I was interested in health and wellness and more of a natural approach, if that makes sense. And it's evolved over time for how I look at that. But that brought me into the world of naturopathic medicine. So in 2019, I started at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, became a naturopathic doctor. As I have evolved in my career in the last few years, I learned that I myself am a high achiever, a high performer, and that has always just been something that has been ingrained in me. I came from a family of business owners and people who are always working and always busy. And for me, it's just there for me. I was always doing things, whether I was in courses, in school, working, doing all the things, and it's like adding more to my plate. In naturopathic medical school, I actually started my own small business during COVID. And so there was just always a lot. And throughout all of that, I did find that my health and my own personal health journey came up. I saw a naturopathic doctor myself when I learned about naturopathic medicine because I had been dealing with all these symptoms that I just couldn't get answers about. And it was the first time that I felt really heard. And so I realized how important having a specific health routine was for me, having consistent movement, consistent healthy eating that worked for me personally. So I had to find routines and habits that would work for my lifestyle as it changed and evolved over the years. It looked different every semester, every course that I took. And so I had to learn, how can I add all of these things into my really busy schedule? And that just made me really interested in speaking to that type of audience because it was me and still is me. And I'm still always learning and growing, but I just find it really fascinating pulling in human psychology into the health and wellness space, especially for high achievers, high performers who have so much on their plate, have so much they want to achieve, but they don't always have the strategies in place to get there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think so many of us identify with being high achieving who are in the integrative medicine world
They're not.
because we're not satisfied with the conventional approach. Like we're trying to dig in and go more and have our own businesses. And yeah, it is definitely a special population where we don't always, we might have the knowledge of how to do things, but not know the application of how to do that. So I think that's a great too, to be able to focus on that population and really get them the results that are really like, they are the population that are really looking for great results and they want
Yeah.
optimal health. But that application is just so unique because they can't just spend their entire life thing and focusing on that.
Yeah, it's getting from point A to point B, which is the hardest part.
Yeah. In this population, like what is the biggest concern that you see, or maybe if, a top few concerns that they're generally coming with?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a laundry list of them, but some of them I will go through. So low energy is a huge piece that I see, especially individuals waking up really exhausted, tired, not ready to take on the day. And then especially those mid-afternoon, like 2 to 3 p.m. crashes, just like I could take a nap, I can't do anything, there's no motivation. That's a huge piece of what I see. We're also seeing a lot of like tired but wired. So again, low energy throughout the day. And then you go to sleep at night and your brain is just constantly running. It's not stopping. And then you can't sleep. And so then you're not getting enough sleep. You have low energy and it's just a vicious negative feedback loop. Weight gain is a huge piece as well. That is something that I'm seeing in a lot of women, especially as they move into perimenopause, menopause, when metabolism shifts and changes. And that's something we can chat about a little bit later. But that is definitely a big concern for a lot of people. There's lack of focus, digestive issues, anxiety, irregular cycles. Again, a laundry list I could go on forever, but those are some of the more common ones that I see.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds like from a trained ear, we can maybe start to put those together of what's the commonality here.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to answer that. Like, what do you think is like a really common issue from that's driving that? Maybe especially for this population. Is there something where you're like, okay, this is the big core issue that's driving this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because everything connects, right? And it can be really, I think, overwhelming for high achievers, especially when they're so busy. They don't have the time to sit down and discuss, okay, this is exactly what is going on with myself, or to try to figure that out within themselves, especially when you don't have that knowledge. You could spend hours scrolling through the internet, looking at different articles, trying to decipher the information. People on TikTok all the time, all these different things that people come across, and then you end up with no answers at all, and you've just spent hours doing all this research and you have no connections. So there are a lot of pieces that maybe look like it's 100 different things, but it could be one common thing, like you were saying. I think in general with high performers, and especially as women, we one have more of the tendency to put others first before ourselves. And so it can look like doing everything for everyone, all the tasks on our list, but never sitting down, never taking the time, always having the reason of, I just don't have enough time. I don't have the energy to do it because I've spent all of what I have on everything else day to day. Whether you're a mom, whether you're a CEO, whatever it is, there's always something. And it's just more common in women to fold all of that in and take all of those different hats and wear them and never take care of yourself. I think we've also been sold this idea that in order to be successful, to achieve more, we have to push ourselves to the limits. We've been taught to wear burnout like a badge of honor. And that is something that people see as, I am successful if I become burnt out because I've worked so hard. And so this is also a huge connecting piece to all of these health issues. Obviously, there's more sciencey aspects to it, but when we look at the overarching kind of topics and things that kind of come together, that's definitely what we're seeing. And then I think too, I notice a lot of individuals, like I was saying, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy. We don't understand that optimizing certain health markers and certain aspects of our health can actually make achieving our goals a lot easier, give us more time in our day, and just make us more productive with the time that we actually have. Because when we're burnt out, when we are stretched so thin and we're overwhelmed, we're likely not performing at our best anyway. So we're spending a lot more time doing the things that probably could be done in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think I see those a lot too. And I think those are really good to mention because people may not identify with the symptoms or yet,
Yes.
but they might be a greater risk of developing certain symptoms or dealing with certain issues if they are, running themselves into the ground and never taking time to rest, doing everything for everyone else and not focusing on themselves. 'Cause like you said, there's an endpoint to that. Like they can't do that forever. And they actually could be more productive
Yeah.
if they schedule time to rest maybe or take the time to care for themselves. And I like that you bring up a point too of like searching on TikTok and getting the answers there, like Googling. I think that's one thing too with this population and a lot of people nowadays is that we have so much information at our fingertips. And we also have a society, at least in the Western world, we have a society where like we are supposed to do everything all of a sudden. We're
Yeah.
supposed to be the CEO and the mom and the house caretaker, like everything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of, okay, I need to fix this myself somehow. I'm really smart. And so I should be able to figure out all of it on my own and not asking for help. And that then makes it even harder.
Yes. Yeah, the not asking for help, I think that's a really common one. I feel like just with humans, but especially as women, again, like we have this shame of asking for help. And that is just digging a deeper hole because everybody needs help. If you can't put yourself first, you're never going to be able to stay on top of helping everyone else. Again, you can't pour from an empty cup. It's a very common saying, but it's common for a reason, right? There is a huge connection between how we support ourselves, how we support our nervous system, how we support our health and wellness in general, and how we can perform. And like you were saying, it's not necessarily just the symptoms that we're identifying with, because sometimes we don't realize we're dealing with digestive issues, or there's a connection between our stress and our digestive issues, or our stress and our high blood pressure, high cholesterol. There are so many connections that we just don't realize. And that's where it's really great to find integrative healthcare approach that can actually take a look at these health markers and these connections between how you're living your life, where you want to be, and what's that middle point of like, where are we bridging this gap? Like, where are we missing pieces? And another thing too is as high achievers, high performers, I think it's really common to fall into that all or nothing mindset. And I think in general, as humans, we are. So going on the typical fad diets, going into a really intense workout routine or just lifestyle health and wellness routine, especially January 1st, you start seeing everyone roll out into these hard 70s or even the soft like 70s, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's great in a sense, but most people obviously don't stick to their New Year's resolutions or anytime when they start these really intense all out routines, because you go from doing none of this to all of a sudden all of it, and it's sustainable for a very short period of time. But when the novelty wears off, and you're still trying to rely on that motivation rather than habit and structure, it's just not going to work. And then also looking at how our brain's reward system works, our dopamine is going to spike when we hit a goal, right? When we do those things perfectly, of course, it's going to feel really good. But if we're in that all or nothing mindset and then we have a small slip, we miss a day, we miss a week, it feels like a loss. Then it triggers more stress, and all of a sudden we're done. I'm done. I'm not doing this health routine anymore. And then you're completely back to where you began, right? And so we put ourselves into this vicious cycle because we don't have a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great point. Cause I can tell you how many women come to me and they're like, okay, they're expecting me to put them on a strict diet and a strict thing. Like somehow they haven't been doing enough yet. And so what the answer is just going to be more things they need to do, more restriction they need to take on. And I'm like, nope, actually, let's go in the other direction and ease things out, simplify, make it more simple. And even like this week, it's a very common conversation I have with someone where she was in perimenopause or like early perimenopause. And she actually had to scale back her exercise to start losing weight. And she wasn't doing anything too crazy, but she's, oh yeah, I was doing the weightlifting and the HIIT workouts and the yoga and all that. She was doing a lot because she was trying so hard to not gain any more weight. And as she scaled back a little bit, she's, oh yeah, that puffiness that I was experiencing, like it just went away. So not like more is not always better.
No. And sometimes, yes, like there is a time and place where maybe we do have to put in what some might say a more restrictive routine, but that is like very far and few. That is more severe cases. In most cases, in most patients that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're probably seeing, it's just actually making these small, manageable shifts that actually do something and have a reason and a place that actually make a really big difference compared to doing more, adding so much more restriction that again is never going to last long term. It's not going to, it's not going to be sustainable. I'm so big on sustainability and balance while also still doing the things that are going to move the needle with our health, because that's also important. And I recognize that, but I also recognize that the extreme is just most often, most times with most humans, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Finding that balance and being able to strategize that of when is appropriate to dial it up or dial it back down. Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe just like for the listener who maybe resonates with this, what we've talked about so far, Where's a good starting place for people to, especially high achieving women, to start to change their health, support their health while avoiding that overwhelm, while keeping, their time in mind?
Yeah, so there's a few different areas I think about when we look at this. The first thing is, again, going to be coming up with a strategic, manageable plan that works for your schedule. So, like I was saying with extremes, you can't just jump from doing no daily movement to all of a sudden 4 days at the gym strength training for 2 hours. It's just not going to work. And again, that actually might be more damaging, more harmful than good. You have to start small. You have to find how it can work for you specifically. Maybe it's adding something like a walking pad to your office. So you're getting more steps in that way. If you don't have time, if you're really busy and you just can't get out for a walk on certain days, maybe that's your way of getting your steps in. I always I obviously always encourage getting out in nature, but it's just not always realistic when we're busy. And so again, this is where we find that balance and where we can give and where we can take in our day to day. Maybe it looks like scheduling your social time with friends at a workout class instead of staying at home. That can be really nice, but the workout class is a great way to be social while also being active. It's finding these little things. Maybe it's a walking meeting instead if you have to have a phone call. Can you go on a walk while you're doing it rather than sitting in your office chair? If we look at diet, maybe we're looking at starting at buying like a baked salad, throwing together that salad that can last for maybe 3 lunches instead of just going out and buying something that lasts for one. Maybe you buy a pre-cooked chicken and you use that to add more protein to your meals. Yes, we could look at what the most ideal situation is, but most busy individuals don't have time to sit and meal prep for 4 hours in a week. It's just not realistic. And so this is where we find these little small manageable things that actually add so much more time to our day while also increasing our quality of life. And then another thing too, I think is important is even if, you can't spend all that time cooking your meals, can you schedule 30 minutes, maybe even less in your week to look and go over a meal plan to have a strategy in place where this is the day I'm going to be in the office, or this is the day where my kids need X, Y, and Z. And so I know if they're at soccer practice, we have to have dinner ready to go rather than going to the drive-through instead. Small, manageable things. If most people looked at the screen time on their phone, they would probably realize that they, even if they're really busy, have at least 30 minutes to do something like this. Because again, when we're in more of a stressed, overwhelmed state, we're probably procrastinating a little bit more, spending time scrolling, the classic doom scrolling. So if you have that time to do that, let's move that to something a little bit more strategic. And that's actually going to give us more of an outcome because you're going to get more results from that. So that's what we look at first. So again, it's that strategic, manageable plan. The next piece is balance, which I spoke about earlier, but just knowing that not every day, not every moment is going to be perfect. That's just life. I think that is the key to consistency overall. Knowing that as long as you are creating lifelong habits and routines, that even if you have a week, maybe even a month sometimes, where you can't eat your ideal healthy meals, you can't do your daily gym sessions, that's okay. Knowing that if you give yourself this grace, while yes, we still have to have a little bit of some of that grit to it and to keep ourselves on the schedule, we also have to have grace. And so realizing that it's okay. And if we're consistent, and if we can come back to it when we are back into our routine and we're doing that over a lifespan, that is going to make so much more of a difference than your quick 1 month long fad diet or 1 month long stint of going to the gym 7 days a week for 2 hours. I promise you that lifelong sustainable habits are going to make so much more of a difference. And then the last piece I would say is the accountability piece. In general, this is just huge for us as humans. I don't care how type A you are or how on top of things you are. I think most of us need accountability in some way, shape, or form. And that can be really hard to get from ourselves specifically. And sometimes we just need a little bit more. So finding either accountability partner, working with a practitioner who can give you that accountability, knowing what you need for yourself and what you're actually going to stick to. Accountability is a huge piece to it because you cannot always rely on motivation. Sometimes we just have to have that consistency and habit in place.
Yeah. I love those. Those are so good because
Yeah.
basically you're making it so it doesn't have to be this grand thing necessarily. What I'm hearing, to reiterate and summarize, is let's focus on the foundations, right? Like, let's sleep, eat nutritious food, and looking at just scheduling that in and doing what you can to not be like all or nothing, like you said, black and white. It just is going to be perfect or it's going to be horrible. But then, okay, maybe, lunch meat isn't the best, but it's protein, whatever, or getting those things in and planning and being strategic and just scheduling some time in there to really be mindful about what you're doing and create a plan for yourself. And then have
Mhm.
this overarching plan of, yeah, you're traveling for work or whatever. It's not going to be great. But then the things that you can do when conditions aren't great, but then also when you are in good conditions, getting back to your structured plan.
Exactly. Like, there's always things we can do regardless of the situation we're in, but sometimes it just might not be as grand as what we maybe would do on a day-to-day basis. It's that 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you're following these things, 20% of the time you're not. I get it all the time too with patients during the summer. That's why I think we often see a drop off of patients this time of year too, is because people are almost ashamed to admit that they're not following all of the things. And I like to tell my patients, like, it's okay. I'm not here to judge you, but where can I help you and where can we make more of a plan that's going to work for you in this moment? If you pay attention to all the times during the summer that you are maybe falling off the wagon, or maybe you're spiking your blood sugar a little bit too much, where can we give and where can we take? Do you love to go for ice cream with your family and your kids and that's something really special to you? Absolutely. Don't say no to the ice cream if that's something you really want. Maybe it's okay, but when I go to a cafe 2 times a week to meet a friend, can I bring my own food instead? Or can I at least have a protein with the croissant that I'm going to have? Making those small shifts too, when we're outside of our routine, when we're looking at the grand scheme of what does my week look like? Where can I break some things down? It can be hard at first, but making these choices when you have a plan in place also makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, yeah, you could just give up for the whole summer. Yes, I have no plan. Or you can check in. I feel like this should be a PSA too, because I have the same experience. Patients are like, they're embarrassed or ashamed.
Ah,
I haven't been doing this. Someone's like, I haven't been doing the diet. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. Where are you now? Let me help you. And
mhm.
strategic here. It doesn't mean like I want to be there to support you. It doesn't mean you have to not show up if you haven't been perfect. There's no perfection in health and wellness.
No.
So, yeah, that's such a great reminder to say, yeah, doing what you can. And honestly, I feel like that's where the magic happens because then you feel empowered no matter
Yes.
what you're doing. You get to enjoy the ice cream, like you said, but also be like, oh, but I also made sure to get the protein before so I don't feel like crap afterwards. Like, I can
Exactly.
good and even enjoy it more fully. So, that's such an amazing point.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the foundations aren't always sexy, so I think that can be a really difficult piece when it comes to health and wellness because a lot of the things that you see online on TikTok, on Instagram, whatever it is being sold to you as this, like, completely life-changing, like, you're gonna be a complete different person after this by doing this one thing or these 2 things, and realistically, they're taking a supplement or doing something that's just not realistic. A supplement is not gonna change your life. It can be a really helpful tool, but it is not gonna change your life. So it can be really hard to get people to understand that the foundations of sleep, movement, healthy eating, stress support, all those things, when we really find ways to anchor those in our day-to-day lives, that is going to make a difference. As non-exciting as it is, it really is what works.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned earlier the things that give us dopamine hits, like having a boring scheduled, consistent routine is not going to give you that dopamine hit. You know, feel better and help you be more productive and all of the above. So yeah, that's such a great point. Just those things are still important and doing what you can to make it maybe more exciting or have the structure in place that you're realizing the benefits. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
One of the things we like started to touch on and maybe to kind of like highlight that one of the things that this type of population, high-achieving people, maybe aren't consistent with eating all the time, maybe work through lunch and things like that. I know I've been guilty of that several times. And that can be a big issue with like blood sugar and things like that. Can you speak a little bit to that of like how blood sugar can play into the energy piece and the mood and all of that?
Mhm. Yeah, so this is something I speak on with all of my patients because blood sugar is just such a key, important piece of overall health and wellness. When we think about blood sugar, we often think about it, I think, in the context of like diabetes. But when we're being honest and the truth or looking at the research, it's just as important for women of all ages outside of diabetes. Diabetes, for the most part, is an outcome of many years of poor diet, lack of movement, unaddressed chronic stress. And yes, of course, there's family history in there, but that doesn't mean that you're specifically doomed to become diabetic. It is life, a lifetime of many years for the most part of these different health lifestyle patterns. So with most of my patients, I look into their blood sugar. So that is your glucose. And then our glucose regulating hormone known as insulin. A lot of the testing that we see being done in conventional medicine only touches on glucose. Typically our HbA1c, which looks at like a marker of an average of our 3 months of glucose. And then it looks at our fasting, if we're lucky, fasting glucose. A lot of times we're seeing random glucose, which is also not really helpful because we have no idea what that patient did or where they were, what they were eating right before they had this test done. And so it really tells us nothing. So if we're lucky, we get fasting, but we definitely almost never see insulin or fasting insulin being tested. And so in all of my patients, I at least do fasting insulin and fasting glucose, but often I'm doing a 2-hour insulin glucose tolerance test. It's pretty accessible, pretty cheap. It's not the most fun to do, but it gives us a lot of information and a lot of insight into what's going on in your body over a 2-hour period when you're fasted. And then once you're in a fed state of having a really lovely glucose drink and what's happening in your body half an hour and 2 hours after you consume that. So that's going to show us what's happening with your glucose, but also what's happening with your insulin at this time. And a lot of what we're seeing is glucose can stay managed for a really long time before it shifts because insulin's job is to regulate glucose. And when we're not looking at what's happening to the insulin, we're not getting the whole picture. Yeah, you look great. Your HbA1c is fine. Maybe we didn't even look that 2 years ago, it shifted from a 5 to a 5.4. We're not looking at those patterns either. But then also we're just looking at your glucose. It's not outside of range. And we're not even looking at optimal either at that point. But that's a whole other story. I could go on about this forever. But we're not looking at what is truly being told by our insulin. Is our insulin spiking super high because it's actually really working hard after years and years of our glucose slowly going up to keep that glucose down? And it looks like your glucose is regulated, but insulin is actually just doing its job really well. Diabetes happens when you get to that point where your insulin is, I can't do this anymore. I have tried so hard. I've worked so hard for so long. And now you're telling me that you're not going to do anything. You're not changing anything. I can't do this. And then it is really hard for glucose to get the support it needs to at that point. And that's where we see the glucose shifting and changing. But that's not happening overnight. That is, again, usually a lifetime, many years of lifestyle choices and things that come together to lead to that endpoint. So we can look at blood sugar as the foundation of the body's energy and our hormone systems because it really regulates a ton of these different processes within the body. When our blood sugar is stable, you're going to get that steady energy, a calmer mood, feel less irritable, and then your hormones in general are going to be a little bit more regulated. But when we have these up and down swings, when we're maybe skipping meals, when we're snacking a lot rather than having consistent meals, when we're having a lot of refined carbs, high glycemic carbohydrates, or we're just relying on sugar and drinks especially can be a really sneaky one that people aren't paying attention to. If you're starting your morning without eating anything and then you're going to Starbucks and grabbing a super sugar-filled drink, this is just a recipe for disaster when it comes to your blood sugar. But a lot of people are doing it because we just don't realize the impact that it's having on our body, especially when we're not seeing changes at a certain point and it's only hitting us later in life. We're not realizing the long-term effects of these daily habits. So those rapid rises and crashes that we get with blood sugar can trigger our stress hormone cortisol. And this can cause that feeling of anxious, irritability, or even hanger, as some people call it. And even that afternoon crash that we're speaking on, that could be related to cortisol. It can also just be related to, in general, our blood sugar spiking really high. And at some point it's going to crash. You're going to feel so tired, so drained, like you're dragging your feet, no motivation, and like you could just fall asleep on the spot. And then you're also probably going to feel like you need to grab the quickest, sugariest, sweetest, carbohydrate-filled food. That's why you get so hungry and you just need to eat whatever is in front of you because your body goes into survival mode. It doesn't understand you're actually not in a dangerous situation. It just needs to survive. That's its job. And so it's going to tell you to just eat the quickest source of energy because that's what carbohydrates are. But again, then we're going to get into that cycle of, again, we're going to spike and then we're going to fall. And so it puts us into this vicious cycle of dysregulated cortisol, dysregulated insulin and glucose, and it's just going to wreak havoc in our body overall. And then, of course, too, that can disrupt even our reproductive hormones over time. Cortisol also plays a role in that. There's a connection to something called HEAs as well that plays into all of this. So things like estrogen, progesterone can be impacted. Our ovulation and quality of ovulation can be impacted. And even having things like worsening PMS symptoms, if that is something that you deal with too, it can disrupt your sleep. Again, so back to that vicious cycle, low energy throughout the day, especially because when we are changing our stress hormones throughout the day, this is going to disrupt our circadian rhythm. Our melatonin won't be able to get where it needs to be later at night, and cortisol is taking over. So again, here we are with that wired and tired kind of complex that we're dealing with. And then long term, there are also big implications when it comes to not regulating our blood sugar. And that can look like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, of course, heart disease. And then it increases your risk of things like stroke, heart attacks, and even dementia, which is now being noticed as type 3 diabetes because of the relationship that we're seeing to our blood sugar. So it's a lot of things, but as you can see, there is a huge tie-in to blood sugar and our mood and our energy and our hormones and so many other pieces because it regulates so much. So this is why I'm very passionate about it and why I think it's so important to speak on this in like all of my visits, because everybody could probably do a little bit better at supporting their blood sugar levels. And I think it's a really good starting point for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. As you said, it's so massively important and so commonly like an issue to some degree. Like you said,
Yeah.
maybe it isn't full blown diabetes. Most people could do a little bit better with eating more regularly, eating more protein, fiber, like doing those boring things that are really going to keep themselves super even keeled. So that's great. And I love that with the glucose tolerance test, just kind of out of curiosity, are there some big themes that you see with that? Do you see a lot of people struggling with that, or how common is that?
Yeah, a lot of the people that I'm seeing, even people in their like mid to late 20s, like that early on, I am seeing their blood sugar levels just spike immensely. Their insulin levels are massively out of proportion. Their glucose levels, some people's glucose levels will actually be completely fine. That's more common to see. And you'll see that their insulin levels are completely dysregulated, like just spiking into the thousands when they should be no more than the 500s at its peak. And same thing can go for certain individuals can have changes to their glucose that seem maybe minuscule. Their HbA1c looks good. They're not in the pre-diabetes state by any means, but they're probably headed there. And we look at something called, so there's diabetes, there's pre-diabetes, and then pre-diabetes or insulin resistance. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of people. Our liver isn't processing our blood sugar the same way that it should be. In general, we're just not getting the same response. Some people will also have the opposite response where their blood sugar will go too low because there's an overcompensation. And so we're seeing a few different patterns, but it is honestly super uncommon for me to see someone with a normal 2-hour insulin glucose challenge. Like it's super uncommon at this point. I've seen very few. So this is why I test it in almost everyone, because most of my patients who come to me, they say, I'm so tired. I can't lose this weight no matter what I do, like what's going on. And we have these labels of what's healthy eating and what's healthy exercise. And we don't realize the connections to other pieces. To stress, for one, a lot of people are living a very high stress life, and overexercising, like you were speaking about earlier, is actually a form of stress. So for some people who think that they're doing good for their body, but they're spending 2+ hours a day on exercise, can actually put your body into a higher state of stress. So sometimes more is not better. And in general, we're just seeing such an impact of the weight that is really hard for people to lose because they're not making these strategic changes. They're not eating, they think they're eating healthy and they're by no means eating unhealthy, but they're also just not applying certain specific strategies. So for instance, something really simple that I tell almost all of my patients is with every meal, you should be consuming a protein, fiber, and healthy fats. And when you're having your carbohydrates, try to stick more towards those low glycemic carbohydrates. And you can easily look those up online, but they're typically just not your refined carbohydrates like white rice or breads, white breads, and all that kind of stuff. We're looking more at things like quinoa, sweet potatoes, all of those things, rather than just focusing on I eat overall. You're probably not eating enough protein. Most women are not. We should be having the 20 to 30 grams per meal I would say 25 to 30 if possible, and especially at breakfast because our blood sugar is already so much more susceptible to changes when we first wake up or when we've been in a fasted state for a long period. So really paying attention, if anything, to breakfast. A lot of people are just skipping breakfast because they don't have time, or they've lived in a state of dysregulation where their body is just not telling them that they're hungry in the morning. And so they don't want to eat anything. And then they wait until they're at the office. And then maybe they grab a bagel on their way to the office or when they get there, or they have their Starbucks coffee with all the sugar in it. And they're not realizing that, again, compounding over time, this is just, again, wreaking havoc on your blood sugar and then your stress hormones and your reproductive hormones and everything in your body. But when we eat protein and fiber specifically with even if we are having like a high glycemic carbohydrate, it's going to at least help slow that spike in blood sugar. So that's also an important thing to pay attention to. And then the order that you eat your meals in as well. So starting with your fiber always, then going to your protein, then you can do your healthy fats, and then last is always going to be your carbohydrates. And that is a great way to actually slow and mitigate those spikes too. Small shifts like that really make a really big difference over time.
Awesome. Yeah. Those are so many of the things that I recommend to my patients too. So I love that you're speaking there is those little like tricks almost that can just make a few small shifts and things can be very different. And I'm glad you're speaking to like the healthy diet thing, because I have so many patients, one in particular that's coming to mind that was eating really healthy. And we actually talked about what she's actually eating. Like I'm grabbing like a Lara bar and then like some of the things because she's a busy mom. And I was like, what about maybe shifting? Like we just shifted a few things. Like maybe instead of that snack, you're doing something that's a little bit higher protein, a little bit lower sugar. And she actually started to track her intake just for a few days. And she was like, wow, she had this huge aha moment. She had a few things. And she was one of those ones who was like experiencing all of a sudden, like weight wasn't an issue for her. She was experiencing that like layer of fluff. And when it just went away, I just tweaked little things and there it went. It was so simple for her, which it isn't always that simple for everyone. But I think having that awareness and finding that strategy can be just so key.
Yeah, awareness is definitely the biggest piece to start with. So I like what you said too about just even a couple days or a week of tracking your protein intake. It gives people a good perspective, or even like your sugar intake, a good perspective of what you're actually consuming, because we just don't really notice. We think we're eating a certain way, but then we start looking at what's marketed as a health product, a health food, how much sugar is in it, how little protein's actually in it. It is pretty ridiculous. Like even the other day, I was at the grocery store and they have pre-made salads. So if I'm like on the go or something and I need something like that, it's a good option. But I was looking at the different types, and the one that was marketed as like the protein bowl had like way less protein than one of the other bowls. When you're not paying attention to these small things, you just don't realize.
Yeah. Makes it so hard, especially for people who are really busy. Unfortunately, there are so many things, yeah, like you said, being marketed to us, sold to us, and given a label that we think we can trust. And a lot of the time, you can't really trust that.
No.
Taking the small amount of time, I feel like it's such a low investment in time, actually, in reality. Like we said, tracking for maybe a few days, taking a moment to go to the grocery store one day where you have some time to look at labels. And go-to template, we were like, okay, cool. I've got my things that I can stick to and fall back on. And then you don't have to think about it from then on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you too, one of the tools that I like to use is a continuous glucose monitor for tracking also. Do you ever use that? And has that been revealing? I don't know if your patient population.
Yeah, I find that it can be a little bit more hard to convince people sometimes to spend the extra money on it, but it is something that I do want to implement more into my practice, because I think it can be really valuable just for people to see the physical numbers. I think when we see that, people just have a little bit more of an idea, but definitely a little bit harder to get people on board with that one. So that is something that I definitely want to work on, but I do love it as a tool for sure.
Yeah. It's cool that you're doing the challenge test at least. So you're getting some of that insight.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like, and you're right. So the buy-in can be hard for a lot of people, but for some people, they prefer, okay, rather than having to sit at the lab for an hour, I can just do this. And I feel like that is another one where a lot of patients have big aha moments of, oh, it's the rice actually that's spiking me even more than the cake or the alcohol or whatever. And just being able to learn and then maybe make some of those changes and then see the proof in it. Oh, wow, my glucose doesn't spike nearly as much when I make some of those changes. Yeah. The other piece that we were alluding to before, we haven't really hit it right on the head, is the stress component, the nervous system, that I think there's a lot of dysregulation in the nervous system in this population. Um, what are some methods for that? What can people do to start to address their stress?
Yeah. So first thing, because we're on the topic, is regulating that blood sugar. That's one of the top priorities because your nervous system is not going to feel in a state of balance or safety if it's in this survival mode at all times. So making sure you're paying attention to that. But then also paying attention to tools that you're using in your day-to-day life when stress does come up. So I like to focus on nervous system regulation through breath work, mindfulness practices, journaling, and different lifestyle strategies to help the body move out of that constant state of stress. And I always think it's important for people to experiment with different forms of nervous system regulation, different types of breath work, different types of meditation, journaling, and all that kind of stuff, because I find that a lot of people can be a little bit resistant at the beginning, and I think you have to find what works for you specifically. People often view nervous system regulation as the typical classic meditation where you're just sitting and doing nothing, and that doesn't always work for people. For some people, it's great, but you have to be able to be open to the process and experiment and find, okay, is this the type of breath work that works for me, or is this the type of meditation or journaling? And I think this also plays into understanding the type of nervous system response you're more prone to having. Everyone, due to how they were raised or their experiences through life, we have the tendency to go into either fight, flight, or freeze for the most part. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of like functional freeze in more of that high achieving population. So if you're tending to move towards that fight state, that might look like feeling more tense and irritable, ready to argue and take action. If you move more towards that flight state, it might look more like that restlessness, that anxiety, just the urge to run away and avoid things. And then there's that functional freeze. So we can look at this like the nervous system's brake pedal response to stress, basically. So instead of fighting or running, your body just shuts down, especially to conserve its energy and resources. But that can look like feeling numb, maybe feeling stuck, disconnected, or unable to take action. So it's interesting because for this one from the outside, you actually look like you're functioning completely fine, like you're able to move about your day somewhat normally. But on the inside, you're actually feeling very disconnected. You might procrastinate more. You're just not able to do the tasks that maybe you once were able to do. And that, again, is leading to not being able to achieve the goals that you're looking for. So this is where we play more into that nervous system piece, those nervous system strategies in order to make sure that we are moving from a state of disconnection or fight or flight, whatever it might be, to back to a regulated parasympathetic rest and digest state so that our body can just do what it's supposed to do rather than be in this state of survival mode.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. I think it's so important that you bring up, like, it doesn't look like meditation for everyone or sitting. That's such a big barrier that I see, especially for higher achieving people, because they're like, I don't have time to just sit and do nothing. That just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And if you say, then journal or then do breath work, something that's more active, that tends to resonate better with people, and maybe at least is like an entryway. Even they might end up loving a certain type of meditation, but yeah, they need to get something started. So that's great. Yeah, and so important. Like you said, it really plays a part in everything. And I think a lot of people are more aware of that nowadays, but it
Yes.
also just feels so ambiguous and out of our control. Great. Stress is just ruining my health. What am I supposed to do with that? I'm not going to quit my job. I'm not going to leave my family. I can't do anything like that. And in reality, it's like, yeah, but you can, because you can implement those little changes and do a little bit of support when you are feeling more stressed, or just a little bit of like maintenance for your nervous system every day, just in line with what you were talking about earlier, those little tiny things that you can put into your day.
Yeah, exactly. So like even some simple strategies that I think are great for more of the high achievers, busy people, box breathing, which is we can focus on the 4-4-4 method. So in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out through your mouth for 4 seconds, repeat that. You could do that for 2 minutes, and that can in itself regulate and bring you back to more of the parasympathetic rest and digest state, or the physiological sigh. So this is taking a really deep inhale through the nose as much as you can. And then with the little bit less that you have, you take one more inhale through that nose, and then you're going to sigh it out through your mouth. This signals to your body that you're safe. It helps to activate our vagus nerve, puts us again back into that parasympathetic state so that we can re-regulate. Sometimes we just need to take that in really stressful moments, and even just having more awareness around that can make a huge difference. And it can be done from anywhere. It's the difference between meditation and breathing exercises. I think a big piece is that, like you said, they're more active. You can also do them from everywhere and not be obvious about it. Breathing, we're all doing it. So most people are not, unless you're doing a really intense type of breathwork exercise, for the most part, something like box breathing or the physiological side, most people aren't going to notice that you're doing it. You can do it at the office. You can do it in the meeting. You can do it wherever you need to do it. And then another strategy I like is journaling as well. Specifically, I use something called mind dumping with a lot of my patients, because we typically have more of this busy mind, a racing mind, again, especially before sleep or maybe right upon waking. And this can really put us into a stress out state. If we spend literally just 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, like you have a little bit more time before bed or in the morning, whatever works best for you, to just write out every single thing that's on your mind. It can be a to-do list. It can just be like complaining. It can be whatever you need it to be. That's the best part. Nobody read it. It's only for you. You can do it more of a Dear Diary type thing if you want. It's really however feels best for you. And it doesn't take long at all, but having that active pen to paper moment actually gets things physically out of your brain onto a piece of paper where you can let it go. And it actually activates our amygdala to help re-regulate it, where our brain's fear center exists. And so this can help to regulate our emotions and just say, hey, I'm safe. It's okay. And then lastly, a simple walk. Sometimes a 5-minute walk can also be super helpful. Walking, again, helps to activate that amygdala and tell it that it's safe, because we're scanning back and forth with our eyes. So our body is able to scan our environment and say, hey, I actually am not in immediate danger. So it's okay. So these are all super easy, simple strategies that we can use. As busy people, again, we all have 2 to 5 minutes in our routine. If we're being realistic, whether that's waking up 2 minutes earlier or going to bed 2 minutes later, we all have time to do it if it's going to help bring us into more of that regulated state again.
Yeah, awesome. And those things, like you said, are so powerful too. It doesn't have to be an hour
No.
sitting meditating. It can be just changing your breath throughout the day. And breath work is so interesting to me too, that the way we're breathing when we're stressed out also has then an impact on our physiology. So with that too, if we just shift it very quickly into a more parasympathetic, relaxed state, then that's really powerful that you're literally undoing what you're doing otherwise. When we're not thinking about it, we're having really like shallow, rapid breathing. You really shift away from that. It's so powerful.
Yeah, like even speaking about the like freeze response, people who are more prone to being like a functional freezer or just a freezer in general are more prone to that breath holding. I know I do it myself. And if you pay attention to stressful moments, be mindful of how your breath is working. Usually it'll become more shallow if you're more stressed, but some people actually hold their breath without noticing. We physically don't notice we're holding our breath in those moments, which can then literally lead to a physiological chemical response in our body of a panicked danger state. We're losing oxygen. We're not taking in what we need to. We're building up carbon monoxide, and it just leads to this whole disarray within our body. And so, yeah, something as simple as just breathing and how we're breathing and how much awareness we have around our breath actually has such a huge impact on like our everyday lives.
Awesome. I think all of us now are like, I was like, oh, how am I breathing right now?
Yeah.
Probably all of you listening are doing that too. And physiologic sigh if you need it right now. I love that. And honestly, like you've given so many practical tips for people today. Are there any other tips that you really find super helpful people that you really want to leave people with? And it's okay if we've already talked about all of them. Again, you gave a lot.
Yeah, I think really we've been over most of them, but I'll just reiterate them quickly. One, start with that system that works for you. It's not going to be what works for the person beside you or the very strategic system that somebody's claiming works for every single person that they see. It's going to be, yes, there are the foundation, but how can we implement it and apply it to your specific lifestyle? So whether that's finding someone that's a coach, functional medicine doctor, naturopathic doctor, finding someone who can look at your habits and your lifestyle from an outside perspective and offer that tactful, simple strategies that actually are going to move the needle rather than the extreme. That's a super important piece. The accountability, like we spoke about, and then making sure you're getting your 25 to 30 grams of protein at every meal, especially at breakfast, making sure you're getting 25 to 30 grams of fiber every single day to help with digestion and our blood sugar. making sure you're getting those healthy fats every day. That's going to support your cholesterol levels, your lipid levels in general, focusing more on low glycemic carbs and pairing all these together in the right order, the fiber, protein, healthy fats, and then carbohydrates, all in that order. And then if you can just find at least one thing you can do every single day to regulate your nervous system, just one thing, even if it's just 2 minutes to start out, that's completely okay as long as you're doing something. I feel like these are some of the biggest shifts that are small. They're simple, maybe not easy to do, but when we start to bring them in one by one, again, we don't have to do it all at once. Make a plan for yourself, get the accountability person if you need to. These small shifts really do make a lifelong difference.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where can people find you? Because you're incredible. So people are going to want to reach out to you.
Thank you. Thank you. The biggest place you can find me, or the best place that you can find me, is going to be on Instagram at Naturally Dr. Kirsten. Kirsten is spelled Kirsten. I often get Kristen, which is why I say that. So Naturally Dr. Kirsten is my Instagram handle. You can find all my information there. My website will be linked there. That is the best place you can find me.
Awesome. And we'll link to that into the show notes, of course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirsten, for being with me today. I truly enjoy this conversation. I think people are going to love listening to this because it's just so practical and so approachable. And I think a lot of people who are in my world and who are listening to podcasts are probably going to resonate with that high achieving person. And so I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to get some of this out to people and to give some of these strategies because I think just as high achievers, we need this. And then again, thank you. I appreciate you for having me here.